I'm going to talk today about the illness essay and the growing trend for illness narratives to appear in essayistic forms. Although I've done a lot of research on life writing and illness narratives, this focus on contemporary essays is new and in its early stages, so I welcome any comments and suggestions. I will be focusing on the 2017 collection of essays entitled Pain Woman Takes Your Keys and Other Essays from a Nervous System by Sonja Huber. Huber is an associate professor of English and teaches creative writing in the US, and is thus very self-reflective upon writing in her work. Her collection concerns her experiences of living with an autoimmune disease and rheumatoid arthritis, causing severe chronic pain. In a 2016 article, Anne Jurassic explores the illness essay. She argues that the illness essay has not garnered much attention from critics in literary studies and the medical humanities, despite the influence of Virginia Woolf's On Being Ill and Susan Sontag's Illness as Metaphor. The focus has been on other genres, the novel, poetry, and more traditionally autobiographical forms of life writing. It's time for critics to pay attention to the illness essay. I tentatively take up Jurassic's demand by offering suggestions for why the essay might lend itself to the subject of illness. To begin my discussion, I want to share two short quotations which shape my thinking about the essay genre in broad terms before I explain how this relates to illness narratives. I write creative nonfiction because while many may ask how I'm feeling, no one asks how I'm thinking. Instead of telling the straight story of memoir, essays say, this is the story of how my mind moves. Both Mary Capello and Leslie Jameson show here how the essay, which we might interchangeably term personal essay, creative nonfiction, lyric essay, offers insight into process, feeling, and thinking. I'm intentionally, perhaps controversially, not defining what I mean by the essay or creative nonfiction, or in fact illness narratives here. For the purposes of my discussion today, I treat the essay, as it relates to life writing, as an example of creative nonfiction, in order to focus on exploring what the essay does and begin thinking about how and why this is an appropriate or possible form for illness narrative. Does the essay offer something that more conventional modes of memoir are not doing? What does the essay do? Building upon these ideas from Capello and Jameson, I think of the essay as somewhere for the meandering trajectory of the mind to play. It is the place for flurries of thought, wandering, experimenting, and crucially of process. It is not linear or chronological. The essay allows incomplete thoughts, incomplete memories, even incomplete experiences to find some articulation. Marie O'Rourke sums this up well when she contends that the lyric essay provides writers of memoir with the ideal form to explore our recollections, offering flashes of intense clarity within the blur of the familiar, built on symbol and metaphor. The form's looseness, its fragmentation, repetition, and disjointed organisation also allows me to honour the partial and the fluid quality of memory, to express the gaps and inconsistencies. Unlike conventional memoir, the essay appears to make space for thought. Instead of, here is what happened, it gives us space for, what are my thoughts about this? What image comes to mind? This is reinforced by Christy Wampol's New York Times article, The Essification of Everything, and the idea of essayism, which she explains is defined by contingency and trying things out digressively, following this or that forking path, feeling around life without a specific ambition, not for discovery's sake, not for conquest's sake, not for proof's sake, but simply for the sake of trying. Room for diversion and deviation, testing out thoughts and feelings, seems especially fruitful in the context of illness. While there is interest and value in a linear chronology and traditional story of one's illness, much of contemporary health concerns are not brief interludes in one's life. They are usually long, sometimes unending. Existing and perhaps more traditional modes of memoir and life writing presume the writer already has the answers to their questions. In many cases, that they know how it ends. But the essay, creative nonfiction, allows the writer to explore what they don't yet know about their experience. The illness essay emerges at the same time that writers of illness, pain, health are actively searching for new modes of articulation, for a form that can contain and accommodate precarity, contradiction, hesitation, gaps in knowledge and memory, slippage. What draws me to medical life writing, especially from the perspectives of patients, is the emphasis on trying out ideas, trying out styles and forms, and finding a voice. The essay can offer this. Instead of organisation, erasure, self-censorship, unconventional non-fiction tends to highlight the slipperiness of representation. Preoccupying questions about authenticity, truth, mimesis, reality can be put aside and instead look towards how someone is thinking, who they are and how they are as they explore their thoughts. The winding trajectory, organised not according to story but to impression, to thought, to brief and moving moments out of the corner of one's eye. I want to turn now to explicitly look closely at Huber's work and expand on this. The first essay I discuss is not that of the title, nor is it the first in the collection. Instead, I begin with the essay which explicitly addresses the essay genre and her relationship to its legacy, in Kidney Stone in My Shoe. Perhaps no discussion of the essay, capital T, capital E, is complete without reference to Montaigne, and that is precisely Huber's subject in this essay. She explains that she spent a summer reading his essays. She sighs with relief when Montaigne finally moves away from grand claims of philosophy to his real body. When he talks about the agony of his kidney stones, Huber is reassured by this human connection. She can relate to the man in pain. His discussion of pain makes him alive. Although quite a short essay, Huber touches upon so many aspects concerning the essay genre and its legacy. The essayist's voice is often propelled by a sense of entitlement, the ability to pronounce a truth for the human race, which is a voice that many women have struggled to attain. The memoir is easier. We say what has happened to us, that we know. We ask ourselves as we write whether we can say anything of universal relevance at all. Reading Montaigne let me understand that the voice of authority is part of the essay's legacy, and let me see that this is where I and many of my students and essays from minority viewpoints have struggled. We've struggled to create essays that sound like essays because we didn't have the entitlement to proclaim or the life experience that would lead us to assume people would listen. With her reading of Montaigne, Huber finds license, confidence to transform the genre to whatever it needs to be for marginalised voices and experiences. Does the essay provide more opportunity to speak of and from experience? Does it play with authority and facts in ways which allow previously dismissed experiences to come to light? This seems to be something that Huber implies, and which at least gives her confidence to persist and not worry that she's talking about her own body. Her essay is in fact not about Montaigne at all. It is about her identity as a writer, as a woman writing, and as a sick woman writing her pain, confirming what Mary Capello explains about the use of prepositions. Creative non-fiction appreciates the power of prepositions. Instead of writing about, as in, what is your book about, it writes from, or nearby, toward, under, around, through, and so on. Rather than mean, it does. It animates. For Huber, Montaigne represents an answer, permission, and a model of deviation, digression, a model for how one's body can be one's subject, to, quite frankly, not give a damn. So I will go on and swagger because the entitlement of the essayist's voice is a costume that Montaigne offers as a model. With my swagger, I will claim that the best writing of Montaigne deals with mortality in the body, and what Montaigne offers there is the willingness to switch moods, to describe things as they are, including the piss and the vomit, and not to be ashamed. Montaigne, as a man of wealth and noble birth, had a life that predisposed him to think that his offerings were worthy. But we can swagger like Montaigne, and I can try to write about my swollen knuckles without ever apologising for being depressing. Montaigne did not give a shit about that, and neither should we. As I think through what the essay is and does, I return time and time again to the phrase, I contain multitudes. And this is how the essay form, the illness essay, presents itself to me. It allows multitudes. Do I contradict myself? Very well, then I contradict myself. I am large, I contain multitudes. This idea of multitudes is especially allowed to develop and exist within the essay collection, hence my emphasis on and other essays. While many of the essays in this collection were first published elsewhere, in journals and magazines, and standing alone, there are some in the collection which would make less sense, or rather less impact, if asked to stand separate. A possibility of the essay compilation or collection is not only the opportunity for self-reference and cross-reference, or the opportunity to revisit a moment or idea, but it also allows deviation in subject and in form and genre. For example, some essays play with poetry or epithetic style. It plays with genre, blurring and bending, and with the slipperiness of representation. Some of these essays feel like chorus breaks or an opportunity for a breather or close of the eye. Every essay in the collection is about pain and mentions the word pain repeatedly, and yet it never feels repetitive or overstated. The reader is not numb to the concept or the reality. Each essay is an attempt articulating pain and pain experience in another way. Each can be an example of having another go at the amorphous and many-headed concept. This approach, addressing pain in its many guises, manifestations, the hellish days of unsatisfactory doctor's appointments, the not-so-bad days when she's able to work and to be, allows for meditations on a moment, an event, an anecdote, and then we can see how this triggers feelings and thoughts. In the alphabet of pain, Huber turns to a brief encounter with a colleague, which generates a discursive thread in how one person's well-meaning but ultimately misguided performance of care is not about two people in a conversation, but actually about politics, society, systemic ignorance of chronic ill health, and failings and shortcomings of healthcare systems. I passed a colleague on the path of our campus library, and she caught sight of my cane and winced. "Are you hurt?" she asked. I wanted to say yeah all the time, but people see my pain only when I carry the length of metal pipe. I told her I had rheumatoid disease. I vaguely waved my free hand in the air around my body. It's autoimmune, systemic. But it's under control, right? She asked. She had somewhere else to be, as did I, so she turned and was walking backward, facing me but departing. I needed to let her off the hook and to make the complex simple. I usually say, yes, I'm feeling good, but that was a lie, or at least a vast oversimplification. I shrugged and said, as much as can be. The subject here is not the conversation with her colleague, nor is it the fact she's had many of these exact encounters before. This is Huber's story. Why should she pause too long on this, when what she really wants to say, and indeed moves on to say, is, our medical system cannot handle me and would like me to go away. Some doctors have given up on me merely because I wasn't an easy win for them. Amidst the articulations of her physical pain or her frustrations with her lack of energy are recurring threads of social and political critique. Huber boldly takes up the gauntlet to critique a healthcare system which treats her as a nuisance. But the essay allows these strands to fold in so that we can see how an incoming high-pressure weather system, which exacerbates her symptoms, is directly tied to national health statistics. Huber speaks with the bigger picture of health injustices and inequalities, failures of systems, absence of care. I only have time to share one further example of this, but I think it is a nice example of the framing of an essay's focus, of using an object to generate a discussion on something bigger. In the essay, The Cough Drop and the Puzzle of Modernity, she begins with a focus on a cough drop wrapper she's kept in her wallet for over a year, and moves on to address Hall's marketing campaign to champion work and the good health of productivity. She speaks of the goading of the cough drop wrapper and builds to how hard she is on herself. Each slogan is surrounded with the parallelogram shape of full Hall's logos, and the diamond clusters repeat off the edges of the waxy paper into infinity, like tesserae in a capitalist bullshit mosaic. Huber raises questions about pain and cure, perceptions on a body that is pulled in multiple directions, but above all must conform. The ethnographic becomes personal, the personal becomes ethnographic. It is historicized, it is politicized. Using Eulabis's The Pain Scale as her touchstone, Susanna B. Mintz argues that the lyric essay is Paine's most suitable autobiographical genre. Almost as hard to define as Paine itself, lyrical essay has emerged as a cousin of personal essay that is by turns elusive, imagistic, ecstatic, discontinuous, and melodic, more often circling, symbolizing, and echoing life events than writing them out in causal, chronological ways. This is what we can also see in Huber's work. She does not tell us the story of her illness, how it began, how it developed. Therefore, the essay seems to accommodate the multiple aspects of her pain. Sometimes the whole world is the pain. Sometimes there is strength for philosophizing and intellectualizing pain. Sometimes there is capacity to turn to others who are in pain, or to educate those who don't understand. I want to conclude by going back to basic definitions. You may have noticed the phrase trying to write or try to write has popped up a lot in this talk, which speaks volumes. It reaffirms that all life writing is effort, but this is magnified when writing of the body, its pain, its faults, and its triumphs. And where is this most notably summed up? In the essay. The essay as verb, effort, attempt, process. The illness essay offers attempts to tell one's story, articulate one's pain, whilst also shedding light on systemic inequalities of healthcare, to speak not only for the self, but for others, especially those who cannot. Like the self, the essay can contain multitudes. Thank you for listening.